Interesting.
Welcome to another edition of African Americans Ain't Africans, the talk show that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the so-called African American didn't find his way to America in the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, the Indigenous One, and tonight, Henrietta Lacks. If you don't know about this sister, you haven't read about her, or you haven't seen the movie, or you haven't heard anything about her, tonight you're going to learn about a lady that has a whole lot in common with you. This is a very important broadcast, and I would really, really appreciate if you study this sister, because this sister is you. So tonight we welcome Charlene Brown, Niecy Lachelle, and Gabriel Rich. Take it away, guys.
Right on. Right on. Appreciate it, Kerry. Hello, everyone. Good evening. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing well and feeling mighty engine. I know I am. Tonight, we are going to discuss Henrietta Lacks. And let's just say the contributions that she made, whether unwillingly, albeit, that she made to the world in general, particularly with Wasichu, because without her, they probably still have a third leg or some shit. But it's a very, very important subject because this woman essentially possesses, I should say possesses, because the Eve gene, because her cells are still alive to this very day, and she died in 1951. Okay, me personally, I had heard about Henrietta Lacks for quite some time, but it wasn't until I saw her family speak at it was Virginia Union University, which was in Richmond. A friend of mine invited me to listen in on them, and of course, I must admit, at that time, I only knew the basics of her story until listening to her family, and it really intrigued me enough to go and read the book. And I must say that even in reading that book, it was just scratching the surface of this woman and the contributions scientifically that she made, and it also there was a deeper and darker side to it, in that they took this woman's genes without her consent, and they, of course, the excuse they used in those days was they didn't have to have the consent of the patient. They could just take their genes and do what they want as they wish with them. But you and I both know that that's BS, of course. And Johns Hopkins University has reaped in to the tune of billions of dollars from research from this woman's genes. Her genes are called the HeLa gene, and SSHELA. And I mean, it cured polio, gave them insights into cloning genes as well, gave them insight into a number of other cures, particularly that Caucasians suffer from in particular. And it is believed that if they can get a handle on her genes, that they can indeed cure cancer. Now, that hasn't been done yet, but still, the fact that this woman's cells were living, and believe me, they had been trying to find cells that were living. They started with chickens first. They would take the blood from chickens, live chickens, and it didn't work. They would take then they'll tell you that they were taken from various other animals and people. Usually, however, they would take the blood from other Caucasians, and the genes would not multiply. They would die off in a matter of hours. So again, we're talking 1951, and this woman died in October of 1951, and her genes are still alive and still multiplying to this day. So with me, I have Charlene Brown, who broached this subject, did her research and broached the subject to me, and Niecy Lachelle, the Mocha Masseuse, my pretty hot, tempting internet wife. And we want to talk about this with you. We want to share this with you, and we hope that you all will, do some research if you haven't already, and we can discuss this intellectually and analytically, because, well, they think that we don't do these type of things, and you and I both know as engines you can't do anything but be intellectual in this day and age, considering our condition here in our own land. So, with no further ado, I'd like to bring on Charlene Brown. Hi, Charlene.
Hey everybody, how's everybody doing?
Hey now.
Hey, hey, hey.
Okay, I just want to say that Loretta Pleasant, Henrietta Lacks, Helen Lane, Helen Larson, they're one of the same people.
They
Her,
are. Could
yes,
you explain that? Could you explain that, Charlene? How they one and the same?
because all of these names that went into the research community and passed around, it was indeed one person, and her name was Henrietta Lacks. She was born Loretta Pleasant when she married David Day Lacks, of course. That's her marital name, Lacks. And nobody knows when she actually changed her name from Loretta to Henrietta. But she was known to her close family, her close friends and family as Henny. Her cells are the most important things that happen to medicine in the last 100 years. There are
Yes.
billions of her cells and labs around the world weighing over 400 times her weight. Her cells made some people and pharmaceutical companies rich. Cell banks and biotech companies were retailing vials around $260. There's no way of knowing exactly how many of Henrietta's cells are alive today. One scientist estimates that if you could pile all HeLa cells ever grown onto a scale, they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons, the equivalent of at least 100 Empire State Buildings. SCLU addresses this question on her website, where she explains how the 50 million metric tons figure was calculated, saying that calculation was based on the way HeLa cells are known to divide, specifically how often they doubled their numbers and the amount of times they'd been alive at the time the calculation was made. She clarifies that it was a hypothetical calculation because that many cells couldn't have been saved and put on a scale altogether. She also says those figures were verified before the book went to press by the scientists who did the original calculations and outside expert. Another scientist calculated that if you could lay all of the HeLa cells ever grown end to end, they'd wrap around the world at least 3 times, spanning over 350 million feet. There are
Wow.
almost 11,000 patents involving these cells. Her cells were bought, sold, packaged, shipped by the trillions to labs around the world. There are a trillion more growing in laboratories. The Tuskegee Institute set up facilities to mass produce Henrietta cells and began shipping 20,000 tubes of HeLa, about 6 trillion cells every week. And soon a multi-billion-dollar industry selling human biological material was born. There is no way, like I said, of knowing how many of her cells are alive today. It soon became necessary to decant them regularly to cope with the exploding volumes. Some scientists around the world learned of the miracle tissue, and the demand saw samples of Henrietta cells being shipped to researchers around the world by even riding into the mountains of Chile and the saddlebags of pack mules. Miss Lack cells have been the subject of more than 74,000 studies. According to author Rebecca Skloot, by 2009, more than 60,000 scientific articles have been published around research done on HeLa, and that number was increasingly steadily at a rate of more than 300 papers each month. According to the National Institute of Health, over 100,000 publications resulting from research using the HeLa cells.
Wow.
And I do mean wow.
Yeah, yeah. Ms. Lack's genes help to advance the development of drugs for treating herpes, leukemia, influenza, tuberculosis, hemophilia, Parkinson's disease, measles, cancer, lactose of digestion, sexually transmitted diseases, appendicitis, human longevity, mosquito mating, polio, study of viruses as salmonella, methods of freezing cells for storage, identification for correct number of human chromosomes, leading to the diagnosing genetic diseases, the effects of radiation, the effects of the atom bomb. Scientists accidentally poured a chemical on a HeLa cell that spread its tangled chromosomes. Later on, that scientist used this technique to determine that humans have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, not 48, which provided the basis for making several types of genetic diagnosis. This accidental discovery allowed scientists to help identify chromosomal disorders, discovering that patients with Down syndrome had an extra chromosome number 21.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's,
I mean,
yeah,
that's heavy.
it's very heavy. Um, you know, I guess I just want to introduce a few terms, because when we throw these things around, most people, science, you're like, people don't really like it. But, if we're talking about Henrietta Lacks, and she is the mother of medicine, and I mean, the contributions that this matriarch has made is countless, is unfathomable. So what I wanted to say briefly in going back with what you were saying, Charlene, is how what they termed what they were doing to the people. Okay. So they had what a term that they used, the doctors used for Negroes, hence our real names, Amerindians. It was called benevolent deception. That was a term that doctors used when they treated patients. This was their mindset, the mindset of Caucasian doctors in using Negroes as guinea pigs. And during the era of Jim Crow and thereabouts. So what they did, they instead of being confined to public wards and hospitals, they get into the patient's minds that they're really doing them a favor. They're really
Exactly.
trying to help them when nothing, I'm not going to say nothing could be further from the truth, but what they were doing was deception in its highest form. Okay. You didn't have
Exactly.
you didn't have anything called informed consent. That came much, much later. Okay. And then they still are doing things with HIPAA, the health in the health insured patient privacy act or something like that. But this benevolent deception, and that's not to say that our ancestors, our people were ignorant. They thought these people meant them well and meant them good. So when the Negroes, Amerindians, when they were treated we were treated much later in our disease process. They weren't given medicines for their pain, even though it was all under the guise of helping them. That's still done today. You will not get effective pain management if you are a melanated person, hence, aka an Amerindian. You're not going to get it, and they even do that to our children. Okay, so that's why medicine is called a practice. It is not an exact science. That's the other thing. They're continually experimenting on people. So, you know, when you're given this kind of information and then you entrusting someone that you feel is there to genuinely help you, then you can imagine we still do that today. But the difference today is that people need to be informed patients. But like I said, I was just going to touch on a few little definitions, like gene. A gene is a unit of hereditary, is transferred from one parent to their offspring and is held to determine some characteristic of the offspring. So a gene is the basic physical and functional unit of hereditary, and genes are made up of DNA. So a gene is a region of DNA that encodes a function. And then part of that is also a chromosome. That consists of the long strands of DNA containing many genes, not just one. So some genes act with instructions to make what you call molecules, and they're also called proteins, but most genes don't code proteins. And in people, humans, which is what we are, we're not mankind, but
Exactly.
so I won't get into the distinction, but in humans, genes vary in size from a few hundred DNA bases to more than 2 million DNA bases. And a human chromosome can have up to 500 million base pairs of DNA with thousands of genes. Then you have the genome. The genome is the complete set of genes or genetic material present in a cell or an organism. A genome is an organism's complete set of DNA, including all of its genes. Each genome contains all of the information that's necessary to build and maintain that particular organism. In humans, a copy of the entire genome, more than 3 billion DNA base pairs, is confined in all cells that have a nucleus. And of course, that's the central component of a cell.
Wow.
So, and then you might want to ask, so what is the difference between a chromosome and a gene? Okay, chromosome comes from the Greek word chroma, meaning color, and soma, meaning body. Chromosomes got their name from the first lab experiments in the 1800s, and they revealed chromosomes could be easily stained with dyes, and that made them easier to study. So a gene is located inside a chromosome, and every factor in your inheritance is due to a particular gene. Genes specify the structure of particular proteins that make up cells. Okay, so in other words, gene comes from the Greek word gena, meaning generation, origin, beginning, kin, or sometimes race. Gene was shortened from pangene, which means all generation. Genes contain DNA, and now I'm gonna try a stab at that. What is it? Deoxyribonucleic acid. Gabe, help me out with that.
That's a tough one. That's always been a tough one for me.
That's why they just say DNA.
DNA.
But that's what it is. And it's the chemical basis of hereditary. And then the last couple of definitions one include was enzymes. They're proteins, and they act as catalysts with living cells. So, as such, they increase the rate that a chemical reaction occurs without being consumed or permanently altered themselves. And that's what proteins do. So, and lastly is gene mapping, because this is where they are now with the Genome Project. You want to understand what gene mapping is. Gene mapping describes the methods used to identify the locus, which is a particular position, point, or place of a gene, and the distance between the genes. So in essence, all genome mapping is to place a collection of molecular markers onto their respective positions on the genome. So DNA mapping then refers to the variety of different methods that can be used to describe the positions of genes. And kind of like a map of a country or city, that's how they work together to locate one another. So that's the science that they're using, and it's an awesome science, and we really, really, really would want to start studying stuff and have a better understanding of it, because the more you know, the more you grow, and we do need to do that.
Okay. here's the thing that I've noticed about all that you said, right? And feel free to chime in with me, Charlene. But I've noticed that, okay, again, I've studied European culture, um, as Caucasian European culture, for going back to about maybe the 17th century, 1600s. Okay, we all know that Caucasians started to take over Europe around that time. Okay, but again, now you're now we're talking top, we're talking about the human genome, we're talking about DNA, we're talking about all of these things. But there was a major explosion of this in the 1900s, particularly
Mm-hmm.
when it came to Caucasians coming in America and coming back and forth from Europe, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
this coincides around the same time where they started doing certain medical experiments on us. Okay, because remember now, um, Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiment predates Henrietta Lacks by almost really about 20 years. It started in 1932,
Mm.
lasted till 1972. But even before then, during the not the Civil War, but during the Spanish American War, most certainly, and quite a few other time periods, they were starting to experiment on us. So my question is, do you think that all of this falls in line? What happened with Henrietta Lacks falls in line because they did a cervical exam on her and they took her genes then and discovered even before well before she died, her first visit to the hospital, they took her genes. Right, they scraped the cervix,
Mm-hmm.
found out that the genes in her cervix alone were astronomical. Do you think that this all falls in line with the number of experiments that they were doing on us prior to 1951, prior to Henrietta Lacks going to the hospital and having her genes taken?
Uh, I certainly do, and I think that's why they um, uh, established that ward uh, at John Hopkins, the colored people ward, to do the experiments on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's my personal opinion.
I agree. I agree with that. And like I said, the trick was to guise it under their term, which was benevolent deception.
Deception,
That's
exactly.
what they called it. And it was like it was really like a damn inside joke almost. I mean, they did good with it, of course. I'm not saying that, but just doing things unsuspecting on people, also knowing that our people are the most studied, the most experimented on, experimentations out the wazoo and beyond, and then we still are not the recipients of the experimentation and their findings. Because why would it be such that you have things that they have found cures for, and one group is less affected by it than your group, and your group was the one that they did the primary experimentation on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Agreed.
See.
yes,
Agreed.
yeah, and then of course it was encouraged when these new social structures came about, and the and us going to their schools and everything. It was encouraged by our own because Henrietta had a primary doctor. Now I don't know what race he was or who he was or whatever, but she had a primary doctor who advised her to go there to that hospital to
Right.
seek medical treatment.
Hmm.
Right.
Nine times out of ten, it was a doctor who was a Negro, aka correct term Amerindian. Okay, so I'm using these terms interchangeable because we go back to what people at that point were called versus their true name.
True.
So we still have today, you have people who look like you within the collective in the medical field, and then they take a back seat to other people, and then you entrust them because we're not the same. Okay, that has been established long ago. We are not the same people. We do not have the same complete genetic makeup in terms of when we get into our heredity, when we get into DNA, these components are different. If that were not the case, then why is it that we're the most studied? Then you would
Exactly.
need us. Now, would you? Would they?
Exactly. Exactly. We don't share the same phenotype. Um, we don't share the same physicals and also physical characteristics, both exterior and interior. We don't share the same characteristics. And
No, we don't, and we don't
yeah,
even share the same um uh um ancestry.
exactly. Exactly. So if that is the case, we are the most studied. And I've come to find that okay, their study of Africans happened far, far before they started studying us. But when they start studying us, they took a quantum leap in science for them, not
Yes,
necessarily for us. And
yes.
as Nisi was referring to, Henrietta Lacks, she did have a primary doctor. 9 times out of 10, he was a Harvard product of Howard University, because Howard
Yes.
University had a
Mm-hmm.
hospital, medical center, and they were producing doctors at a pretty record rate. They were actually producing at one point in time more doctors at that time than Harvard was. So, 9 times out of 10, that doctor was an Amerindian, a Negro. 9 times out of 10, also because of the society that he belonged to, he and the Hippocratic oath that he took, and probably wanting to get ahead and probably thinking if he's doing the right thing, he gave
Mm-hmm.
that information over to
Mm-hmm.
the doctor at Johns Hopkins, who then came in and started,
Mm-hmm.
because she went to the doctor many times,
Mm-hmm.
and also remember she was pregnant. She
Mm-hmm.
had just actually had a baby. Actually, she had just had a baby. Her baby was only about 4 months old when she passed.
Mm-hmm.
So she took several trips to the doctor, and each time they scraped her cervix and took DNA without her consent. So and of course, benevolent deception is at play. Have you noticed that benevolent deception is the same thing also that cops tell you? Cops also say the same thing. Cops are actually they can lie to you to get what they feel is the truth or a confession.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with doctors. They can lie to you and make you feel as though they are doing you a favor and that they are there to help you. And a lot of Negroes, we took them at their word because, well, that's how we are. We that's how, particularly in that era, that's how we were. Okay, so my thing is, okay, what was the name that they used for her? Because the doctor, again, he was practicing deception. They didn't give her name Henrietta Lacks. They said her name was Helen.
Lane.
Oh, Helen
Helen
Lane.
Lane. Yep.
Helen Lane. Right. Okay. So uh, that in itself is deception.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows that what he's doing is wrong, or else he would have told who the genes came from. Okay. My thing
Exactly.
of it is, do you who is it just Henrietta Lacks? Because I'm
Oh,
quite sure they worked on quite a few other people, and this came about. I mean, I'm quite sure her genes aren't the only so-called what they call it the Eve gene. That's really what they call it. They call it the
Mm-hmm.
Eve gene,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm quite sure she is the only one that possesses it. Do you think? Do you think she's
No,
the only one?
no,
No,
because
I
we're still being studied. And then my thing is this: okay, who is to say? Okay, if you have a tumor, supposedly she had.
supposedly a tumor,
Okay, a tumor can be benign. It doesn't necessarily have to be malignant. We
and
don't we don't know. The only point I was gonna make, because this just won't leave me. We don't know if something was done to her to speed that process up, because
exactly,
based on, and all we can go by is their records and their documentation. She had lesions all inside her body. I mean, really? I mean, I've heard people being quote unquote eaten up with cancer, but I mean, this is from having something that spread unknown to you or whatever. I don't think the woman had. I don't think she had that. I think something was done to accelerate it. And having a tumor, again, does not necessarily mean that it's cancerous. It can still cause you pain. It can still do you harm. It is an accelerated growth, but it can be benign. It doesn't have to be malignant. And then at the point that they did the autopsy on her, she had cancer throughout her body.
So they said it had metastasized through her body. Also, initially they said from the video that Charlene sent both you and I, in that video, the nurse specifically said that when they examined her, they didn't see anything that was really wrong with her. All right, nothing that was out of the ordinary until they did a cervical exam, and then all of a sudden maybe they cited a tumor or what have you. But then all of a sudden, after that first visit, her situation worsened. Her relatives said that after that visit, that she was be racked with pain.
Yes, they did.
Right. So who are we to say after they discovered her gene, okay, that they didn't from that point on exacerbate her situation?
We can't say that.
We can't.
And we would never know that.
We'll never know. Who's to say that they didn't turn her malignant or her benign tumor malignant?
That's my point.
Yes, and I agree. Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing because, you know, I don't want to sidetrack too much, but the father of gynecology, J. Marion Sims, I think that's his name.
Yes.
Man, if you want to study something, then you get the book called Medical Apartheid. That'll have you up at night. You know, just looking at what was done to those women, you know, many of whom were enslaved without anesthesia, because he said giving them anesthesia was too much trouble. Okay. That, you know, that's what he said. And then he was known as the butcher. Yeah, that's his name, James Marion Sims. That's his name.
And you had a lot of butchers out there. You had a lot of butchers out there, including one Margaret Sanger.
Oh my God! Yes. But see, it and then it lends to a lot of things that gets jumbled all up in here about inferiority. Who would use genes of a group that's inherently inferior? Who would do that? You know, in my Barbara Sizemore voice, who would do that? Who would do that? Nobody would do that.
Right.
Okay. So this whole idea of the group of Negroes, aka Amerindians, being inferior, that is just BS on a stick. And I have to say that. You're not going to use anything that you think is inferior. If anything, you know that it is just the opposite. And you're hoping that it holds the key to some things that have to do with your own group, because we don't have the same diseases. They don't monesticize, as you said, Gabe, and that's the great and correct word, at the same rate and all of that. You know.
Right. Exactly. Which also leads one to believe that, and I'm not trying to get too far away from Henrietta Lacks. She's the subject matter, but it's all related, I think, as we have all discovered. Who are we to say that sickle cell anemia isn't a form of disease that has been made to weaken us? Who is to say? Who's to say?
You can't.
I don't put anything past them. I don't put anything past them whatsoever, particularly during that time when they were doing major experiments on us. The one thing that I can say about Henrietta Lacks is after she passed, is just how quickly these doctors jumped on this. All right, and one of the first things they did was get inroads into two things that were racking them even in that time period badly: tuberculosis and polio. That was one of the first
Absolutely.
two things that they jumped on quickly and discovered that her genes could actually heal. All right, could cure. All right, so from there, we're talking about now. Charlene, didn't you say okay? And also another thing that the gene was used for, one that they don't talk about is they were using it for the so-called the super soldier. It was used as a serum for the super soldier, meaning Captain America, if you will, a soldier that doesn't get sick, has a bump up in their mitochondria, about a 1 to 1.5% bump up in their mitochondria, where they don't get sick, where they're stronger, faster. That's this type of thing, kind of like with Jason Bourne.
Mm-hmm.
They also used her healer uh, genes for that as well. I don't know how successful they've been, not in the totality of it, but it has been successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And see, when going back to what you said about the polio virus, that was a crippling,
Yes,
debilitating disease, and it shortened people's life. Their longevity, shortened it considerably. Okay, we weren't affected as much by that disease.
bingo.
We weren't.
The same with
Now,
tuberculosis.
right.
Yes.
Now, the only thing I was going to say, the HeLa cells made the perfect host for studying the polio virus. Okay, it made the perfect host based on how those cells could be manipulated and put in there. And then you ask yourself, polio is supposedly, it is eradicated pretty much throughout the world. Okay, but yet the CDC still has vials of it. Wonder why.
Hmm.
Just had to put that out there. Wonder why that is, but they do.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question real quick.
Go
This
ahead, Gary.
lady, this lady would have been 100 years old if she was still here today.
Yes.
So she died almost 70 years ago. How much studying have they done on us in the 70 years?
A lot.
Is my question. And is this just her? Did this just happen to her? Or is where you're seeing many of these people who are getting their organs taken or they're being experimented on? Are these the same type of experiments being done to people every day? All these kids come up missing. And we are not what we are not what we think they tell us we are.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
It does.
Because it seems like we're just going around here and I always get beat up for this, but it seems like the African American tries their best to be the dumbest motherfuckers on the planet.
I agree.
So other people can come in and take your DNA where they want to it, and you're the sickest on the planet. You're
Mm-hmm.
dying, you're not having kids, you're not doing all this stuff. But other people can come study us. And we can come up with all kind of ideas and beliefs of what we are, and it's totally wrong. So my just a simple question to this Henrietta Lacks is, what does Henrietta Lacks have in common with all of us?
Awesome.
Okay. Let's see. Which one of you would like to take on Carrie's the questions that Carrie posed
Well,
first?
I can.
Go
Uh,
get it.
Go
uh,
ahead. Mhm.
what Henrietta has in common with the rest of us is that when the explorers came here, they found our ancestors here. They found Henrietta's ancestors here, just like they found the rest of us.
Right.
Mhm.
She's and I mentioned this before, um, how they're how sisters are being encouraged to give to donate their, well, not to donate, but to give up their breast milk to be
Mhm.
compensated, really pennies on the dollar for their breast milk. Now,
Mhm.
I agree with Carrie. You know, I mean, Why would you want my breast milk if I'm if I'm uh uh,
Inferior.
inferior? Thank you. Thanks, Nisi. If I'm inferior, why would you need to study me? Why did you go to bed and wake up fucking with me? Excuse me. You
I
know,
agree. I agree with you, brother Kerry. You're absolutely right. On that great video that just opened my, you know how you have some horseradish or something, and it just opens your nose up. Not everybody like it, but you know how you can eat something hot or something and it just open you up. That video that you share with us, called "The Way of All Flesh" by Adam Curtis. So it's out there, on YouTube. So everything that we have is well researched and studied. At the 18 and 36 mark in that video, the doctor who did the most, he was a biologist who did the most research on her, not Dr. George Guy, but it was another biologist. I think I forgot to put his name down. He said, you won't find, this is what Henrietta, and there's a great question, Carrie. This is what Henrietta Lacks has that we all have. He said, the doctor said in that video at that 1836 mark, you won't find these enzymes with any other group except blacks. Now, this was in the late 70s, early 80s or so when he said it. And so I'm quoting what he said, which means our people. And of course, we're not trying to use that term, but that's what he said. He got a lot of guff and pushback from that. And then in that video, you see him, he tensed up and got, well, you won't. And that's what because he pushed back on them. You're not going to find any of this within any other group. That's what he said.
Yeah. And he got a lot of blowback from it. He
Oh,
got
yes.
to the point where they started taking individual tests of their own,
yes,
and realized that what he was saying was correct, albeit they didn't want to admit it. What I will say, in pertaining to Buck's questions is this. It's pretty simple in terms of the organ stealing that's out here today, particularly our sisters, girls, and women who go up missing. I think what they found in Henrietta Lacks and discovered in her in 1951, I think they've been on the manhunt ever since to try to find that similar gene, because the more of it they can find, the more research they can do. And of course, they have an unlimited budget when it comes to research for them. And I think what you're seeing, a lot of the nefarious actions of our girls and our women going missing, is due for that reason, because they are always, and again, the thing about Caucasians is, all right, they don't, morality doesn't play into it, ethics doesn't play into it. Clearly, ethics doesn't play into it, or you wouldn't have benevolent deception, correct? So, okay. Philanthropy doesn't play into it either, because remember that her family never received a dime, not one thin dime, for the billions of dollars that they have made off this woman's genes. Okay, so they always carry an agenda, and their agenda is survival. They make up about 6% of the world's population, and that number dwindles with each passing day. There's not enough of them being born, both here in America and around the rest of the world, that, and that's their worry, that they will know in 50 years, 100 years, they'll be wiped out. So what they do is they play the game with us. This is what you see with the casual killings of us here in America. And that goes back to the Casual Killing Act 1669, which actually in the beginning, 1669, didn't even apply to us, because we were still Indians in 1669. The most of us, very few Negroes, still mostly Indians. So it didn't apply to us. It applied to them here as slaves. Okay, ended white supremacy, and now they get a privilege that they've never had. But they've got one problem. They're genetically fucking recessive. So what do? You have to convince the people who are genetically dominant that they are genetically recessive, and Caucasians are genetically dominant, which a lot of African Americans actually do believe, and Black folks believe. So I think the propaganda machine that they use, and under the cloak of that propaganda machine, they go in and they kidnap these brothers and sisters, and they kidnap brothers too, but particularly women. because they are forever looking for another person. And I think they found other people as well. I think they found other variants of the Eve gene. Maybe not exactly like Henrietta Lacks had, right? But certainly other variants of the Eve gene, which I've been told by a sister who, wow, at the time she was about maybe 97 years old. She lived to be about 101. She said every, and she said she would say colored because in her era that's what she grew up saying, colored. She said every colored woman has, and she was into. She never, she had as much as maybe a 8th grade education if you want to go there, but she was smart as fuck, and she was pretty much steeped in science. And she said that every colored woman's got the genetic stuff that they dream about. And the one thing about white folks, she said this, one thing about white folks is, all right, they always want something that they don't want to pay for.
Oh, say that again, man.
So they'll take it.
And back to the biologist who I said got the pushback because he's in that video, and
Yes,
I'll name it again. The video is "The Way of All Flesh" by Adam Curtis. He made one of them so pissed, and I did jot his name down, Leonard Hayflick. Okay, he was a cell biologist. He tried to fuse some of the gene line with his own daughter. Can you believe that? So if these cells are all this inferior and this all that, but it isn't, because all of this is a miracle genetic line, but it is from soul people. So he tried, it didn't work. Okay. And what they discovered, and they gave it a name called spontaneous transformation. And they had never seen anything like this in terms of normal cell development. But when it came to cancer and what was going on with cancer, we didn't get cancer the way Caucasian people did. It had a different name. It wasn't always called cancer, but we did not get it on the levels that they got it.
No.
Cancer became such a thing that it was because of Henrietta Lacks and her cells and what they did and all that manipulation, experimentation. One of the biggest multi-trillion, forget billions, they've long surpassed that. You know where I'm going with this, the American Cancer Society.
Yes.
The National Cancer Institute. They're two different things, both of them. Billions, trillions of dollars. American Cancer Society, National Cancer Institute. Well, do you honestly think that with this kind of information and the ability to do what they could do you think that they were going to truly find cures to the greatest extent? Do you think that? I would hope not.
Right on.
Do just enough so you can keep the spigots going, okay? Because both of these organizations, they're off the chain, well regarded. Not like they were back in the day, but they're still up there. And what is it? Susan G. Corman.
Yes.
Breast cancer awareness. That too. Okay.
Yes. 3 separate entities, but they all still have the same agenda. The agenda has nothing to do with us and our benefit, but their benefit always at the expense of us. And you know what you're saying, Nisi and Charlene, what you're saying reminds me of something that I remember in the 90s. This is when the whole AIDS epidemic was hitting, crack epidemic was hitting.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Now, time is erasing. The thing about the Reconstruction era is it is ongoing. Right? The whole Reconstruction, it has nothing to do with building buildings and all this other bullshit. It has nothing to do with that. It is the reconstructing of our history, because that is what Caucasians do. They come, they adapt and adopt your culture, and then they write you out of the history of it. And so this is what is happening right now. So in the 90s, you had a number of children. I remember this like yesterday because I was dating a nurse, and gosh, she was fine. But that's neither here nor there. But my point is, but But my point is, okay, you had children who were born with AIDS. And by the time they were 5 years old, they no longer had AIDS. And it was none of the medicines, and all the medicines that they would use at that time. What was the one they were using? Interferon. They were using another one, the one that Magic uses. All right, all of this stuff for HIV, born with AIDS, not HIV, yes, born with, but I'm talking AIDS. Well, these children were not supposed to have survived 6 months, but somehow made it through, and then when they're diagnosed later, they don't have AIDS anymore. Or crack babies who were, and you know what happened, a lot of these crack babies caused a lot of psychological, mental balance thrown off. But by the time they're 12, 13, a lot of them recovered, depending upon, how severely they were addicted when they were born. All right. That only that I can think of, I don't know of any Caucasians that has happened to. I know Caucasian kids who, okay, their mom was on crack or meth or whatever, and that kid is just all fucked up. All fucked up, period. And there are very few times where that kid makes it through, right, without some form of defect. All right. And at the same time, what you were talking about with autism, we're all around the same age bracket. How many autistic kids do you know when we were coming up?
I didn't know any.
I didn't know any either.
So
you, Charlene?
Not a one.
Not a one. Not a one.
Didn't know any.
Now our children are being, born autistic or becoming autistic at a record rate.
Well, see, the other thing that this this phenomenal woman who is Henrietta Lacks is all of us, and she is the father of medicine for them, if you want to call
it medicine. She is.
But, because, yes, cures are within that, but then you have the ability because of the power to withhold cures. So you have that because what her cells did was create the field of virology. Okay. That's the study of viruses. Viruses you can use for pandemics. You can use them for everything. They are the very basic makeup of cells, but within viruses, you can unleash a whole lot of different plagues and pandemics and things like that. So over the years, scientists, this is what they say. Now this is attributed to, in a good way, so they say, by creating the field of virology, okay, study of viruses. Over the years, scientists have infected hardy HeLa cells with HIV, herpes, the Zika virus, measles, and mumps, just to name a few, to better understand how to battle them. Okay, because what they did, this allowed them to study white blood cells and T cells, because they form the very surface of proteins. Now you see where you can go with this stuff, right, sister, brother? Y'all see where you can go with it?
Oh yeah.
And just a couple of years ago, I think that was like what, 2014, 2015. Remember all those over in those it wasn't here, but it was over in those South American, quite a few of them South American countries where the babies had the Zika virus and they had shrunken heads. Remember that?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And we're not even going to talk about some of the stuff that they've done over in Africa with a lot of the viruses that they've released on the people there. All right. And the thing about viruses is viruses have to have the perfect condition for them to actually work.
Yes.
It has to be under the right conditions, right? Environmental conditions and what have you. So, as you were saying, Nisi, they have the power to withhold certain cures, but they also have the power to create these viruses as well through that. And I think that they've been doing it, and it is ongoing. I think that they've used a number of these. Oh, and let's not talk about. Let's not forget what you were talking about with the three corporations that you were talking about. Let's not forget the World Health Organization in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
Because we can attribute the Atlanta child murders to the World Health Organization. because anybody studying that case knows that Wayne Williams didn't kill those kids. He killed some people, yeah, but they won't them. You know, they got him because he did kill a couple of homeless people and he was a weirdo. But other than that, you know, that's about it, you know. So, okay, so you can't forget about the World Health Organization as well. So, and here we're talking about in that situation where the boys were killed, the tips of their penises were cut off.
Wow.
One testicle removed.
Oh,
On each of them. And then they try to throw you off the tracks by killing a 14-year-old girl.
Whatever it takes.
And it never stopped. And it never stopped.
Never did. Stopped. Never did. Whatever, no. and whatever it takes, because here it has always been the quintessential quest for immortality and longevity.
Longevity for them.
Okay, now I'm gonna, you know, I told my sister Charlene that I was gonna behave. I'm gonna be good. But now you can't be a group, you know, that's gonna be able to embrace mortality, longevity, and all that when originally you wouldn't. Your genetics, your hygiene wasn't that good, because you know, when you would just step onto a landmass, people would just drop dead. Damn it, they would just drop dead. Okay, think about that. So you had stuff that other people didn't even have. You know?
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's real. And it is still happening in some of those rainforests and some of those so-called undiscovered. I don't know why they use some of these phrases. Undiscovered land masses. How the hell is it undiscovered? People live there. They know where they at. They don't want to be found. They don't, you know. But it's undiscovered because you're not there. Then as soon as you step there, the people just fall dead like flies. They just, you know. It was this one man, the gentleman, he was talking. I saw it in the video, and he had a translator of his own people, and he said, soon as they come, our people just fall dead. They just fall all up and down the river, just fall dead like flies. Because the people had no immunity to the
diseases that
absolutely
the diseases that they had. Exactly.
That's saying a lot.
It says a whole lot. Okay, I just want to revisit since we're talking about other experiments that Carrie was saying about other experiments. Okay, we're talking about Henrietta Lacks, of course, as you all know, Engine family, and for good reason, considering that her cells are still alive and well, still multiplying, and are being used by scientists, doctors, all over the world.
Yes.
All right, in untold numbers. We'll never know. We will never know how many people in how many countries are actually using her cells, because they're also sold in the black market, Charlene, for something like about $1,000 or $1,200 a pop. Sometimes even more than that. Sometimes it depending upon what part of the world, $15,000 a pop.
Wow.
A vial, right?
Yes, or a vial. Or a vial. 15 grand for just one vial, particularly in Eastern Europe.
Dang.
See.
So, okay, but you had other tests. We would test subjects and other things, such as prison inmate test subjects. 1951, Dr. Albert Klingman, a dermatologist at the University of Pennsylvania and future inventor of the Retin A, began experimenting on inmates at Philadelphia's Holmesburg prison. As Klingsman later told a newspaper reporter, all I saw before me was acres of skin. Acres of copper skin, of course. It was like a farmer seeing a field for the first time. So over the next 20 years, inmates willingly allow Klingman, because of benevolent deception, they willingly allow Klingman to use their bodies in experiments involving toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, skin creams, detergents, liquid dyes, eye drops, foot powders, and hair dyes. Right? And though the test required constant biopsies and painful procedures, none of the inmates experienced long-term harm. That's actually a lie. A lot of the experiments they come to later find they did produce long-term harm in a lot of the inmates. But being an inmate, you have no rights. You cannot sue.
That's right.
Wow.
It's amazing what, again, this remarkable matriarch, what she was used for, and the yield, the results, and where we are today. I During my research, and this is from Friday, okay, this is the name of this study, okay, because a lot of times, even when they're doing studies and then they're trying to go back and replicate things and then see how it can, they're always going to be the beneficiary of their own experimentation, and everybody else maybe not, typically not so much. So that's how that works. So this one is about Parkinson's disease. Come to find out that Jesse Jackson supposedly has Parkinson's disease, but I'll touch on that if I don't forget a little bit. Now, the mutations in these genes associated with hereditary for Parkinson's disease, because that's what they've done, is try to mutate them, trying to trick the genes. And some of this stuff is just coming from Mama Nature. Okay. And so, Mama Nature, Sister Karma, hey, they do a hell of a tag team. Now, these mutations that they're doing in association with this, the hereditary Parkinson's disease, it led to toxic accumulation of what they call manganese. Okay. And what manganese is, it's an essential metal that helps enzymes carry out their functions in the body. However, too much manganese is toxic, and especially for your central nervous system, your brain, spinal cord, and that's where it can accumulate, and it can lead to Parkinsonian-like syndromes. Okay. Now, what Parkinson's disease is, and it is not as prevalent with Amerindians. It just isn't. But what it is a degenerative disorder of the nervous system. It affects predominantly the dopamine producing nerve cells in a specific area of the brain. So normally these nerve cells, they make an important chemical, and we know what dopamine is. Dopamine sends a signal to the part of your brain that controls your movement. Okay, that's the function of dopamine as it's made in the brain. It lets your muscles move smoothly and do what you want them to do. So when you have Parkinson's, these nerve cells break down. We do not have this on the level as high as Caucasians and Hispanics, and principally those in the Midwest and the Northeast. So then the other thing is that when you can no longer have enough dopamine, then you have trouble moving, then you have the kind of irking and jerking and kind of stuff like that, and it gets worse over time. Okay. Now, in these various studies and so forth, they know full well the genetics and the heredity and the DNA of the various groups are affected differently, some vastly so. Okay. And it's important for people to know. But we also know that things are created from that very information that can weaken you, as Gabe said. So we have other things. We have upticks. They want to just say that it's due to stress, it's due to poverty, it's due to lifestyle. Everything ain't due to your damn lifestyle, because over time, when this is infused into your genetics based on your demographics and where you are, then it indubitably affects you as a group over time. Does that make sense? Because that's what's happening.
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
When you got high blood pressure, you got diabetes. We didn't have all this kind of stuff to the extent that
hypertension.
Exactly. And now, where did all the damn dialysis, the dialysis places are popping up faster than a convenience store in your neighborhood?
Younger people are now going are on dialysis now.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are.
They're younger.
They sure are.
Not to mention that you have a lot of our. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charlene. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's this?
I mean, what responsibility do Amerindia doctors have to their own collective?
Good question.
They have a hell of a responsibility. But the question is, what uh, your incentivization versus your conscience. And so it seems like the incentives outweigh your conscience, and your conscience just get muted. That's what I'll say, because that's what seems to be.
Well, I know one thing: if they're Masons and or um, Christians, they feel they do not have a responsibility to their collective.
Mm.
I would say that, and I would stand on that.
I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Well, here's the thing, and we the thing about us is we don't tend to plunge into the Caucasian mind and psyche as much as we should because they stay plunged in ours because this is we're their system of survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, before they started doing human experiments on us, they were doing humanoid experiments on each other. Okay, so and we have to understand that their test subjects they yielded what not to do, and studying themselves and testing, particularly the rich testing the poor, right? The so-called educated testing the uneducated because that's big for them. Um, what they found was they are genetically recessive. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do now then? You go to the people who are genetically dominant. But before you even get there, I mean, the types of stuff that they've done to people. Look, everything from wow, they were putting hepatitis in mentally disabled children, their own
Mm-hmm.
children. They were injecting hepatitis into these children to see how they would respond to hepatitis. And this is in the 20th century. This is actually in the 1950s. And let me say this: a lot of these experiments happened in the 1950s, just after World War II, when a lot of your German scientists got asylum and immunity over here.
Absolutely.
They bumped up. They bumped up a lot because the Germans had been experimenting. Well, let's call them what they really are. The Bavarians had been experimenting on each other for so long. They had been experimenting on each other. They had been experimenting on each other so long, right? That the Bavarian rulers or German rulers were melanated people. Their leaders were, who were experimenting on not only the other melanated Europeans, but in particular the Caucasians. So the Caucasians came along when they came to rule in power. All right, they started experimenting on their own as well. They had to find out what made them tick. And so the experiments that we got, no matter how brutal, no matter how whatever, they got the same shit. They did the same shit to each other. So if they'll do it on their own, you know damn well they'll do it to us. That's a no-brainer because again, ethics, morality, and philanthropy has no place with them. None. So we're talking about the many experiments, Operation Moonlight Climax. Okay, that was CIA sponsored. Okay, it was the study of, and we know this one, Moonlight Climax is the study of LSD on individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and this started in San Francisco in the 1950s. I lived in the Bay Area. I know quite a few people, particularly white folks, because they weren't doing it on us that much because we won't drop an acid. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I know quite a few white people used to work with one. Most of them were hippies, drugged out hippies who were looking to get high on anything they could, who were part of this operation, who to this day, to this very day, they will just start bugging out because
Mm-hmm.
LSD has really no time limit in your system. You'll go on a trip just like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Where I mean, we could be talking in the lounge or lobby at work or this and that, and they're telling me about the good old days of hippies, and they just start going on. They just start tripping out. I've seen this, and one of them told me that he went back to the experiment 3 times just so he could get high.
Wow.
Looking for that high, brother. you don't understand, Gabriel. The times, brother. We were doing some experimental drugs, brother. God, I'm tell you, free love. That cat will start. I mean, he can't drive. This man can't literally. He cannot drive because he'll go on an acid trip just like that. And next thing you know, he's driven into another car, driven off an embankment. You name it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that he cannot do that average everyday people do, right? He has to be pretty much monitored at all times because you never know when he's going to go on a trip. And that may seem harmless to some people, but just think about that.
You know, Gabe, experimentation, just looking at this is it's the way it's presented is it's like a big sword under a cloak, you know, and it's a double-edged sword at that. You don't know what you're gonna get.
True.
So on that note, I was looking at, and these are recent studies. Okay, these are recent studies because let me tell you, family, when you get out here and you start digging around, you'll find a lot of recent stuff that taps into older stuff. So don't ever make the mistake of saying, "Oh, that was a long time." This shit is a continuum. It never stops.
Never stops.
Science,
Tavistock Institute.
It's a continuum. So on this note, Alzheimer's disease. This is something that's released from the January 7th of 2019. Okay, so this ain't old. That's why it's a continuum. And then again, Sister Henrietta Lacks, she opened the door. That was a miracle, and it was just like going into quantum physics and beyond, Gabe. It was the equivalent of that. That's what her cells were. So Alzheimer's disease may develop differently. Okay, if we the same, they come out with the studies saying they want to say, "Oh, we're all the same." We're not the same. They come out with studies telling you that they're not. Then they try to walk you back, and then they try to create double talk and have your head spinning like a top. Alzheimer's disease may develop differently in so-called African Americans. That's a fuckery moniker. I'm sorry for that, but hey.
You know what, Niecy? Sometimes it's just good to say fuck. Y'all just say it with me now. Come on now. Fuck. Woo!
Well,
make your head pop off.
Well, that's what this study is saying. So, yes. but the problem with it is that it's caught on, and this is within our collective. What they found is biological clues that help them explain. So they say why Amerindians appear to be. So they say this is how the double talk starts. Appear to be more vulnerable than Caucasians to Alzheimer's disease. Says who? Because more Caucasians have Alzheimer's disease than we do. Then they'll come back. But see, this is a game. So they'll come back and say, well, it's because we haven't been studied enough. Okay, because with this very study, it was a study of 1,255 people, 1,255 people, both so-called black and white, so-called. So what they did a cerebrospinal fluid. They tapped some of that from the Amerindians. They saw that it tended to contain lower levels. Stay with me, y'all. Lower levels of a substance associated with Alzheimer's. Okay, this from a report that was released by the Journal of American, the JAMA. What is that? The Journal of American Medical Association of Neurology.
Yes,
that's what it is. This was released on the 7th of January 2019. But it comes right back because this is how the double talk keeps playing out. So I try to get people to change their thinking, and you really have to focus on these glyphs, how they're spellbinding, and how they keep throwing them at you in different ways. Yes. Yet they say that those low levels, we have lower levels of this cerebrospinal fluid. We have lower levels of it. Yet those lower levels did not seem to protect so-called black participants from the disease. Really? But they didn't really have the numbers to say that, because guess what? Out of that 1,255 participants that they used for this study, Okay, because this is a published study. They only included 173 Aboriginals, and they only were able to get spinal fluid from half of them because the rest of them said, "Oh no, 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 no." They didn't give it to them. So how can they say that? Okay. Now this is what else they did. They I'm not going to call the sister's name because she was on an NPR on this study and it's a report, and so she's talking on this. So I ain't gonna call her name. She's out there, can be found. They bring out someone, okay, who is young and she's in this field. They bring her out, and then she's literally stressing to them that we need to be more inclusive in these studies, okay, because she is a cognitive neuropsychologist, and she's at the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center in Chicago. So she did this, and she did this editorial, but at the same time, she was chastising them, saying she understands why our people are reluctant and why they are under, quote unquote, her words, underrepresented in these groups of these so-called experiments. Well, hell, it just makes you not want to, when you look at the whole history of it, you don't benefit from their findings, but you're used as a guinea pig for the beneficiaries of the people who have the diseases, and you don't get, your group doesn't get the benefit from hardly any of it. If they do, it's long delay, and there's still shit in the mix. That's the best I don't even feel like trying to come up with another word. That's just what it is. So they say hypertension, diabetes, obesity, stress, and poverty are prime risk factors. Every time they say stress and poverty, and they include that as a risk factor in terms of nurture and nature and all that kind of stuff, then it's amazing because here the construct keeps the collective of people in that level, does it not?
True. True.
That's the double talk, and that's what they're always feeding you, and it just goes back and forth, back and forth. But you do see an uptick in our people getting Alzheimer's, but that also you didn't see that either. Just like you didn't see all these autistic kids within our collective. You didn't see a whole bunch of people getting no Alzheimer's, did you? Did you see that when we were growing up? I didn't.
No, no, I didn't. I don't even know of anybody who had Alzheimer's when I was a kid. Any of the elders coming up as a kid, and me being a kid in the 60s, mid to late 60s, early 70s. I mean, and when I say kid, I mean, you're talking about a lot about elders, our grands and our grands were born. Some 1920s, 1910. I mean, my grandmother was born, my paternal grandmother, my paternal in 1910. My big mom and big dad, my big mom was my great aunt. She was born in 1908. My big dad was born in 1904. And even then, I had some people in the family, relatives, and also just elders that I knew were born in the late 19th century, and then none of them that I could think of had Alzheimer's. That didn't come until later.
Right.
About the late 70s, 80s.
Now
my paternal grandfather had Alzheimer's.
It is getting more prevalent, but then you have to ask yourself, where is the exposure? But in having experimented with our collective so much, wouldn't it just stand to reason that, which we already know, they know the genetic weaknesses of the markers that you can spike different things and make sure that people are exposed to different things to get these symptoms and these factors, and then you keep the money coming, and then you're just trying to do under the guise again of benevolent deception, because you've already created some things specifically for their group, because it's not going to affect your group because they're not the same.
Point of what you're talking about, Nisi, and Hormone therapy for prostate cancer poses fatal risks for black men, proving one size doesn't fit all. So basically, what they were doing, they were using hormone therapy for prostate cancer for brothers. They got a slew of these brothers and giving them hormone therapy, right? It works, is more successful in Caucasians than it is in us, Amerindians. But that's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer because, hormone treatment for us isn't going to work for our cancer anyway. That's not how you cure cancer. The cancer cells out. So, how many men do you think that they use for this study? Because they know damn well it's not going to affect them until they come up with this conclusion, which they had come up with long ago, but they're receiving funding for. In the medical and science world, they have an unlimited budget anyway because they're government contracted. So just the little things like this that they do. Another one that I picked up on, I read this book a long time ago on what is called remote viewing. Have you ever heard of this? Remote viewing?
No.
Remote viewing is if I were, let's say, Charlene and Nisi have certain information and documents, and you guys are in an office somewhere, and you guys talk out a lot, right, about this information, this vital top secret information. So what I do is I get directly below in a room, directly either above you or below you, and I lay down and I put myself into a sleep-like trance, and I can hear every word you say. I can pick up everything that is going on in that room. I can see what is happening in that room as well as hear what's happening in that room. This is a study that was done in the 1960s. It was done first by the CIA, and then it moved over to the military. As a matter of fact, there's a movie called Men Who Stare at Goats with George Clooney that talks about remote viewing. Anyway, okay, we all know that they don't have the ability to do these things. Because if they had, they would have talked about it long ago. And in the many novels that I've read, as well as history books that I've read, I ain't never talked about that shit. So, considering that, it has been said by, and keep in mind, I grew up in a city or town that has a military base, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. Used to talk to a lot of cats there who were privy to top secret information that they could never really go into detail. Some of my friends, as a matter of fact, they can just give me glimpses of what they talk about, but they're not going to come out and tell me everything because, well, they ain't trying to die. But one of the things that they said that they were using for these soldiers, we were the test models. We were the test models. But what they were doing with us is they were doing, what they were saying was giving the test models, us, this Amerindians, giving us exams. And what they were doing was they were taking our DNA and they were trying to modify the DNA so they would work into white soldiers.
Wow.
And they were using, they said that what they call unnamed DNA source to enhance. If I had a sneaking suspicion, if I had to wager a guess, I wouldn't be surprised if that unnamed DNA source wouldn't be Henrietta Lacks.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely. And, on that same note, bringing it home to the present. So you got the link between vaccines and Amerindian boys, okay, that was hidden by the CDC. Okay. You have had more than one whistleblower about that.
Yes.
So when people use words like conspiracy theory, and if you are an Amerindian, you're a fool. There are just some phrases that you need to delete out of your vocabulary because the conspiracy is on us, and it sure as hell ain't no theory about any of it. Okay, none of it, because almost all the things that have been said and people aren't as ignorant or as stuck in oblivion as they thought. People knew something wasn't right and things were going on, and they got it out as best they could. So what this study showed is what had been, and people were saying something was wrong with their children, there's some weird and all that, and it didn't affect every child, but it affect enough to whereby this is a significant study, right?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know, it just went dead, so I could, it was so quiet, but which is good. But anyway, they have known for a long time that when the MMR vaccine is given to male amerindian babies, okay, toddlers, before the age of 36 months, 3 years, that increased their risk of autism. So how do you know this without experimentation, that would be the likelihood? How do you know that? Again, Henrietta Lacks cells created the whole field of virology.
Yes,
Virology.
it sure did.
It created that. So, and when you have melanated boys, and for whatever reason, doesn't affect girls like that, but it's not to say some girls don't have autism, but it affects the risk factors and how this this vaccine that they shouldn't have, they know they shouldn't have, but then you have them to tell the mothers to put them on a schedule of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. Yes or no, y'all? We all got kids. Ain't that the schedule?
It's the schedule.
Okay.
That's the
And this
schedule.
is when I became aware of this information and was doing the study, it just made me cry. I just wanted to pull my hair out and stuff, because you ask yourself, how do you how do you, what kind of conscience do you have to know that this is something that you're creating? You have this knowledge, even if you, and I'll try to give you the benefit of the doubt, even if it happened inadvertently, but you figured it out. Why do you keep on denying that that this is the case? Why do you keep doing that? You see?
Yes. Mm. And it's never ending. It's never ending. That's the thing about it. They are always on a daily basis, always scoping, always monitoring, always investigating, researching, biopsying, DNAing,
Mm-hmm.
murdering, you name it. Everything, genetically, social engineering us, behavior modifying us every day. It never ends. It
This
is an
info
ongoing construct.
gave this information, and Charlene, this information was intentionally removed from the final 2004 study results. Okay, from the CDC, and the one of the doctors who removed it, he kept it, because he just, I mean, it's like some conscience did strike him. And of course, when you come out with information like that, then the first thing is to ruin you. I'm not going to get into the rest of it, but the first thing is to dismiss you,
Yes.
to denounce you, you know, and to literally try to ruin you, to castigate you, and put you, peg you in some kind of square peg in a round hole, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you guys realize that it was Henrietta's daughter-in-law who first discovered that they were using her cells?
Yes.
Yes, I
Yes.
did. I
And
found that out.
also remember that they actually, not only did they take her cells, but they went to the family, her children, and took
Mm-hmm.
their blood as well, and didn't tell them what they were taking their blood for
Right.
many years later.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They actually told the family that they wanted to see if they were going to develop the same cancer that their
Right.
mother had
Right.
died from.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And
Benevolent deception.
right. And they had been going to, her son Lawrence was talking about, he and his wife had been going to that institute for years, asking about her records, trying to get the medical records, trying to get answers and everything. And Henrietta's son said that everything that they tried to get from this institute was given to Rebecca Skloot, who wrote the book.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they gave it to her, wouldn't give it to the family.
That is what Henrietta's son Lawrence said.
Wow. See, you know, I mean, it just really puts a bad taste in your mouth, when you read about that, when you hear the family tell their story, because this is their mother, and regardless of how it came about, this is her contribution to the world, and then they have a right to know the truth. They have a right to know the full extent, or at least to the great extent, to some extent, what all her cells were used for, because her cells were made cloning possible. Her cells were the first one to ever be cloned.
Yes.
Period.
Her
Okay.
cells were the first ones. Sorry to cut you off, sis, but her cells were the first ones that they discovered lived outside the body
Right.
and was able uh, uh, to multiply infinitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just kept going.
And
Kept
again,
going.
they had been doing this on other test subjects, particularly chickens,
Yes.
for years.
Rats.
Rats, chickens, pigs, because
Yes.
pig for them. I don't know if most of us know this, but for them, a pig's flesh is the closest thing to their flesh, and also pigs' organs are lined in pretty much the same places. They're are very similar to their organs.
Wow. See,
And
now, gosh, I mean, I just have to. I'm trying to be quiet, because when you delve into this stuff, you really have to try hard to tamp your emotionalism. You really do. Go ahead, sis.
yeah, her son Lawrence also felt that the book and the movie did not portray his mother uh, accurately.
And it did not.
No.
And yeah, he said that his mother was a classy lady. She was not poor, and she could read and write, and she liked the movie star glamour. That's why she always painted her fingernails red.
Mm-hmm.
And
Also, this belief that she was a farmer, because that's what they always say, a poor farmer or whatever. Look, she worked on a farm as a kid. A lot of the kids who
that
lived in
was
the
their
country,
farm.
that
That's
was
what
their,
Yeah.
exactly, it was their farm, and a lot of the kids basically at that time period worked the farms. Okay, but when she got married, her husband worked at a steel mill, and he was also in the military. They owned their own house. They were not like these poor downtrodden. How many poor downtrodden people are wearing furs? Because that's what she's wearing in a lot of her pictures. She dressed
Mm-hmm.
glamorously. She made a lot of her own clothes, but she could afford a lot of what she wanted. The woman actually in the very video that Nisi is referring to says that about her.
He
yes.
does. She sure does. Wow. She absolutely does.
Yeah. And
And I was just going to say that her daughter, when she started asking questions and she wanted answers, and she started, as early as she started in 1974. And so she started with the leading medical geneticist, okay? Because she just asked to tell her more about these HeLa cells, and which is, the tissue culture cell line that they came from in terms of cancer that did kill her mother. Then the researcher who was collecting, now he is in their home, just like what we're talking about. He in their home collecting
Right.
blood from the family to map the HeLa genes. And this is what he did. He was beyond an ass, but this is the norm. He gave them, when she asked about it and everything, he gave her an autographed medical textbook that he had written, and said that everything she needed to know was in those disc pages. That's what he told her. And then it would be another 30 years before the family got a better explanation from them trying to decipher that, because he didn't even want to talk about it. So not only do you dupe people, and you come to them under the guise of helping them, when you're really using them, okay, it could be okay for people to be used if they knew they were being used. You know what I'm saying? You know, people, it's a song, use me, baby, use me, but I like to know that I'm being used. If I know that I'm being used, I might be okay with it. I don't know. You know,
Could be a Bill Withers situation, niece.
that's
Just
what I'm
keep on
saying.
using me till you use me up.
That's the song I was thinking about. But see, no, you do people, you, and then you wanna talk all arrogant and sarcastic and just act like the person is the ass, but you really are the ass, and you are benefiting from every aspect of that person, of that group. And this happens over and over and over.
Yes. And he also said that they would not consult with him, or give or extend him the courtesy of setting the record straight about his mother. What they did, went to a lot of the family members, but he was old enough. I think he was around 16 or 17 when she passed. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of his siblings were young at the time, and he knew his mother best than anybody because he cared for his mother when his mother got sick,
Yeah.
and he took care of his siblings later. And so he felt like he was overlooked
Mm-hmm.
because he would have given them an accurate portrayal of his mother other than what they wanted to portray of her.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And yeah, and all of this thing, everything you need to know about your mother is in the book. That's what infuriated him because he knew his mother,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and the pictures that were passed around, and a lot of the information was given to him, given from him to his sister, who shared some of the family information. And I don't know how accurate that was, and whatever the case is, but he certainly had a problem with the way that his mother was portrayed. His mother was not. He said his mother helped him with his homework. They were not poor. His mother helped. He remember her riding her horse and teaching him how to ride as well. She used to bake. She used to bake apple pies, and she loved to dance. She loved to cook, and she was a beautiful woman.
Well, see, the, the whole broad brushing of painting people as being, these type of categorizing people, so to speak, in these type of ways, is so that people feel they will come out feeling two ways about them. They either will feel sorry for them, okay, but not enough to really do anything or advocate for them on a larger scale, or they just dismiss them altogether as nothing. So it kind of works both ways,
Right.
and you're supposed to be grateful. See, that's why you have these depictions of people. You're supposed to be, damn it, grateful for what we do for you. We are giving you access to medical care which you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. So for your payment, we want to use you in this research. We know you're okay with that. Basically, that's that's you're rather disposable anyway.
And
You see?
yes. And the thing about the movie, I read the book first, right? And of course, the more I begin to learn, and again, after the family that I saw at Virginia Union
Mm-hmm.
University didn't look like a family who was out there sharecropping, dumb, poor, broken folk. They didn't actually seem that way at all. They were actually all quite well to do in their mannerisms. They acted like I'm going to tell you what they acted like. They acted like Negroes from a bygone era who had a bit of air of class and dignity about themselves, and despised the fact that their mother was being propagated to be this dumb chick who got sick and whose genes accidentally happened to, save the Caucasian world. The movie, I can tell you right now, if you want to try to learn about Henrietta Lacks from that movie, you ain't gonna learn much. What you're gonna learn further establishes that the fact that Oprah is pretty much one of an agent of chaos. The movie painted them as dumb hicks, backward hicks, didn't know what was going on, could barely read. Oprah was the lead ringleader in that. And the movie was worse than the book. That's an hour and 32 minutes of my life I can't get back.
It was horrible.
Yes, it was horrible. My suggestion to anyone, you're going to learn more about Henrietta Lacks from YouTube videos these days, articles that you can Google. Particularly Google Henrietta Lacks conspiracy and see what comes up, right? Because you'll find out the real deal behind what was going on. Because if I had to wager a guess, I'm not going to say all Negro doctors at that time, all right, were complicit, but a lot of them were complicit because it meant for them a means to step up. All right, to be accepted by what they felt at the time was the white majority, which is the dumbest thing ever. But we still don't get that one. But just really quickly, we got about 20 minutes left in the show, peeps, and I'm glad. I love the dialogue that's going on right now, also on YouTube. You guys, really appreciate you guys for chiming in. Hey, and you're right. Niecy and Charlene are doing their jobs, baby. They are handling theirs, and I am just here looking at all the beauty. That's what I'm doing. So, but I just want to just some of the things that they've done today. Okay, we all know that the prison industrial complex is just out of control. Correct? Absolutely. What do you think most of your experiments are being done in prison right now?
Absolutely.
In prison,
men and women,
particularly women, also men, but particularly women. I had a friend who he was ill, yes, but he wasn't ill to the point of death or anything of this nature. He wasn't taking care of himself. All he had to do was slow down a little bit, and he would have healed up complete. Because his family were Indians and they told him what to do. And unfortunately, before he could do it, he got caught a charge. Had served 3 years in prison. And while in prison, his situation exacerbated, right? Got worse and worse and worse to a point where they said he was terminal. And you know what they do in prison is a lot of the times they release you before your time period and let you die on your own, so they're not responsible for you. Particularly if you have AIDS, they will let your ass out and let you go die somewhere so that they're not responsible. Okay, so come to find out, he passed away not too long after he was released, about maybe a week or so. Now keep in mind, it's almost similar to Henrietta Lacks. Okay. He had an illness, but it was diagnosed as nothing that was too serious. All he had to do was just take care of himself. Went to prison, okay, and in prison, he was only in prison for about a year. Come to find out, they had been doing experiments on this brother, giving him certain injections, tested to see his healing factor, how quickly he would recover, and if they shoot this in, will he recover at all? Oh, this is interesting. My goodness, look at his genes, to the point where they killed this man. And to this day, his family feels that this was God's will because they're Christians now. That this is God's will, and they accepted it so.
Gabe, that's always going on for the longest of time. Perfect example of having people in a subjugated situation, and they have, they're a captive. That's a captive person. So, And again, you have no rights, you have nothing. You're essentially a
You're a number.
non-person
Exactly.
when you're locked up. But
You're a
before
number.
we go, I want to make sure that I touch bases on something. I was saving it for last, on the racial and ethnic disparities in cervical cancer. And on that note, I'm talking about HPV, which is what they're pushing on us. I want to make sure I get this in, the human papilloma virus. Okay. This is with your Gardasil and some other stuff. I can't even think of the names of this stuff. They started pushing this stuff out there on you in starting about 2006. And the reason I remember, because I had my niece, she's the only girl child for my mom, so she's the only one. The rest is boys. So I had I had custody of her, and she was 14. And I remember, took her to get a little pap smear and different things, make sure everything okay. That's this is what you're told you should do. I remember the doctor, and it was a white female doctor, come talking to me about this stuff, and I had just started seeing those commercials. And she said, "You really want to get her vaccinated?" I said, "Vaccinated for what? She had all her shots. I mean, I'm just not knowing what she's talking about." And she said, "Well, there are different kinds. Gardasil." When she said Gardasil, that was the one that I had seen the most. And I said, "No, no, no. She doesn't need that." Well, if you change your mind, it really will guard against what's called the human papilloma virus. I said, "Well," I said, "Who?" And then I went and did research for myself. And from that point, because my niece is a young woman now, I have come to find out a lot of these young sisters, they are sterile, quite a few of them, can't have no kids. It's all kind of stuff. The HPV virus is it's just one of those things that just seems to pretty much exist in nature, and it can go away on its own. Okay. However, I have come to believe that it's something that can be exacerbated with whatever they do, different things that they can do. Because what that is, it's a very common virus, HPV. I didn't say HIV. I said HP is in Paul, V is in Victor. Harry, Paul, Victor. That's what I said. It's an infection. It's commonly causes skin and mucous membrane growths, warts. Okay, who has warts the most? I don't see that many of us with no damn warts. Do you see a lot of us with warts?
No.
Okay.
It's usually them with warts.
And then the warts to me goes back to herpes and things like that. But I'm not. I'm not going to even go into that strain, because these things have similar strains. And like I was telling the sister earlier, I took microbiology in college, and that was the most fascinating C+ I ever made. So that shit was hard.
You got that C+, Niecy. You got that C+, sis.
but on a serious note, they're trying to get a lot of young mothers and talk to some of your elder mothers, your grandmother, your mother. This don't be quick to subject your daughter to this stuff, okay? And then they say, because I am into the double talk of the BS. That's how my mind runs, because it makes me so angry. Okay, if it's more than 100 varieties of the human papilloma virus, HPV, then you ain't got no damn vaccine for all of them anyway. You understand? You don't have it. This is a recent study from October 19, 2018. If anybody wants me to give you some of these studies, they come from the Mayo Clinic. They come from, various things like that, showing you what's going on. But you should have your own common sense and deductive reasoning. And again, thirdly, they already said that the HPV strains affecting so-called African Americans, African American women, which is Amerindian women, differ from the vaccines that they giving. Did you hear what I said? So how's the damn vaccine helping you anyway?
It used to be I'm sorry, Niecy. real quick. It used to be propagated that there were two forms of AIDS, and then again, this is in the '90s. I don't know if you Google this now, you probably won't find it. A lot of the stuff that happened in the '90s now is being kind of like omitted from Google. But there used to be AIDS 1, AIDS 2. Basically, you had an AIDS for people of color, and then you had an AIDS for Caucasians. Now, I don't hear much about it today, but fortunately, I have a pretty good memory despite all the reefer I smoked in that time period. So, you know, but I remember this. I remember this. And we're not the same. We're clearly, we don't have the same phenotype. We're just not the same. We are humans. They are humanoids. We are mankind. They are kind of a man. So considering that, and considering the situation that we're in today, where they are now on top of things because they hold all of our resources, meaning our land. All right, we are subject to any type of experiment that they may give us, whether knowingly or unknowingly, because they do a lot of unknowing experiments. How many communities that can you think of, family, that they have dumped toxic waste in our communities or in our neighborhoods, because we don't have communities anymore, in our neighborhoods? Do you realize that when they dump that toxic waste in your neighborhood and people are affected by it, they do that for a reason. They do that to find out the effects, the adverse effects, and possible cures for doing it. We are going to be their test subjects for as long as we are here, and we ain't going nowhere. They're going to leave before us. So wrap your head around that. Wrap your head around the fact that they are always seeking to tweak on us to improve themselves, because at the end of the day, for them, it's about their genetic survival. That's what racism is. Racism is a race for both genetic and economic superiority.
You know, Gabe, I really, really want to stress one last point about this, because this ties right in as we're wrapping it up with Sister Henrietta Lacks, with the disparities of this cervical cancer research. They've had so much time to study and manipulate and do gene composites and all that kind of stuff. So if they say that Amerindian women are twice as likely to die from cervical cancer as non-Hispanic white women, and yet they have the HPV more than any other group, okay? But it's also saying that the HPV, because I want young mothers of preteens and adolescents, I want them to understand this. Don't be giving your daughter this shit. Do not, okay? The HPV vaccines protect against, so they say, cancer-causing strains of the virus that's most often found in the overall population, but not strains found in Amerindians. Well, damn. And then here's what the doctor said. This is a Dr. Catherine Hoyle. She said, and this is a quote, so I made sure that I got it right. She said, African American women, if they are 20% more likely to develop cervical cancer and almost twice as likely to die from the disease compared to non-white women. Okay, that's what she said. And she's a professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Duke University. Okay, that's right there in your neck of the woods, Gabe. So this is real stuff. But then she went on to say, if the screening rates are comparable for so-called African American women and white women, then, and I'm leaving you with this, then why are the rates of cervical cancer and the mortality higher among African American women when we have cervical cancer screening program that works so well?
Right.
Okay.
Charlene?
Yes.
Because you've been sitting back in the cut. What's on your mind, sis? What's on your mind?
Well, you know me, I did a little digging, and I of that area where Henrietta Lacks' grandmama is from. And I found this. More than 100,000 artifacts have been recovered from this site, and radiocarbon dating has demonstrated that the site was occupied from approximately 950 to 1425 AD. Environmental data has indicated that the site was occupied year-round rather than seasonally, and it is currently estimated that between around 200 people live at the Wade site, which is crazy. We know more than 200 people. They're fucking Indians. Excuse me, y'all.
She finally unleashed the beast, Niecy.
Yeah, you know I love it.
I was trying to be good.
It's all good. It's all good.
Okay. This
Oh,
research,
woo.
yes,
Okay,
because
I'm back.
I mean, come on. I mean, it's always post dating, always uh uh just lies. Okay.
Hmm.
This research has focused on a variety of questions, including um substance subsistence strategy, and that means to support life, the support of life, and horticultural developmental, social organization, mortuary practices, and environmental reconstruction. So this is what they're studying about these people who were there between 950 to 1425. More than
Hmm.
100,000 artifacts have been recovered. Come on now. She was
Mm.
she was a tobacco farmer. Her family they were tobacco farmers.
Tobacco farmers, yes.
Right,
Virginia. Mhm.
right. She wasn't an alien to America. She was an Amerindian.
You know,
She was an American Indian.
the thing, Charlene, is in the Smithsonian right now. That picture that they have of her, where it portrays her as looking closer to Caucasian than it does her looking like an Indian, right?
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
It is a slap in the face and insult. Her son that you were talking about, he was left out of a lot of agreements that the family made with them. One of the agreements they made with them was that any gains or any updates, news, or advances with her genes, they would get credit for it, but they would not receive compensation.
Mm-hmm.
The family
Wow.
agreed to that, and he was left out of it.
Right.
So he has been actually in the fight
Exactly.
um, to get compensation for the family. One, and two, he's hopping mad about this portrait
Right.
that's in the
Because
As he
Smithsonian,
should be.
he was
He
saying,
should
as he
be.
should
why
be.
she has an estate. Why won't they go through her estate? Why are they picking off these little people, cousins and nieces and all these other peoples instead of coming through the estate?
Right.
Where, yeah, where things could be portrayed correctly. So
Yes.
what they're doing is that all of these other family members are going along and getting paid chump change instead of these people doing the correct thing coming through her estate
Right.
like they should.
Right.
But that's their hey, that's their what is it? Uh MOU, method of method of apparatus. That's what they do. So
Yes.
you have to create conflict within a group in order to keep them from being united. So that's what they do. And
Right,
so the family is a glaring example of our whole collective. That's what they
exactly,
do.
exactly.
Yeah. Agreed.
More
Agreed.
than
So
Well, we
100,000 artifacts, guys.
I hope they take that picture down because in 50 years she's gonna be white.
Oh,
she's
she
going to look.
is.
Yeah, she's going to be white. She's already looking like an Italian chick now, so
Yes,
she's
she
going to be
does.
white. She looks Sicilian now, so that yeah, she's going to be white. Okay, we got about a minute and a half or so left. Any final thoughts?
You go, sis, real quick, and I'll go after you.
No, I just like to say I appreciate the show. This is something that we needed to do, and thank you all for coming together to do it. Thank you, and thank you too. African Americans ain't African.
Oh, Thank you, African Americans and African. Hey, that's the group. We invite you to come in, join. It's a lot of knowledge there. Um, Thank you guys for sharing this. It was a labor of love, and it's definitely a mission that we got to keep up. And that's to all of you out there, family. Keep up, get on your job, do your research, and this is for the young people, for the children, for our future generations.
Right on. I just want to say, Engine family, it's time that we start thinking strategically. That's how they beat us. They beat us because their strategies are better than our strategies because we don't have it. All right. And we need to do a better job of thinking strategically, and everything that we do, everything we do right now at this point in time should have a purpose. Malcolm X said we are not outnumbered, we are out organized. And he never lied about that. And we need to organize. It's time to organize, mobilize, strategize. Time is now. Start getting to your children now. All right. It's all about the children because a lot of us won't live to see this through, but our children will. So let's get to it. Feathers up, peeps. Feathers up.
Feathers up, peace.
Hey, just want to say thanks to the group for giving such a high quality information packed program. And this is what we're trying to do at African American, give high quality information, y'all, because we ain't gonna live on that R. Kelly shit.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate it. Please get over to AfricanAmericans.Africans.org. We have audio books, we have books, we have t-shirts. Go to A4 Pure. We have a genealogy all ready for you. All you got to do is fill in the words. And like that Henrietta Lacks, she didn't call herself black, aboriginal, autochthonous, blah, blah, blah. This is what Gabriel was saying earlier, how we always tricked, how we always outthought, because we always let other people label us, do experiments on us, and take us out of here. We're going to have to be a lot tighter than that in our thinking, y'all, because we've been doing ain't working. So really check on your people, find out who your people were. Like Charlene, she talked about Henrietta. Who was she? Where'd they come from? What were they doing? 1400? That's not that long ago. And it pulls right up to Henrietta Lacks. Who were those people? And this is who we have to find out about, who they were and what they did, so we can continue doing. We'll see you next time.
Peace.